Have you ever wondered why some people can learn so much more, so much faster than others? It's not about money, and it's not about where you were born. It's a skill, the most powerful skill you'll ever learn in your life, the ability to learn super fast. Scott Young, a super learning expert, shares his secret techniques of learning in his book, Ultralearning. Back in 2012, he first completed his wild learning project, the MIT Challenge. He completed a 4-year MIT computer science curriculum in 12 months without taking classes, but he passed all 33 final exams. That's not the end. He then committed to another project in 2014, the Year Without English. He attempted to learn 4 languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, and Korean, in 12 months. He traveled to those 4 countries to learn the languages and reached an intermediate conversation level in all 4. To make it even more extreme, he said that he didn't speak English at all for the entire year. Ultralearning is a skill, not a talent. Young refers to his ways of learning as ultralearning, the art of learning very quickly. Believe me, everybody can do it. Why? Because it is a skill, not a talent. You're not born with a skill, you acquire it. That's the definition of a skill. This video was inspired by Scott Young's amazing book, Ultralearning. You might not find the title and book cover appealing, as its name sounds like a lame self-help book. But remember the famous quote, "Never judge a book by its cover." And I can promise this is one of the most powerful books I have ever read. So it's my job to get you to read it. If you are interested in the book, please find the links in the description below. Why you need ultralearning. In the age of AI, the world is moving faster than ever. Traditional education will be outdated sooner than you think. These days, everyone can learn almost anything from the internet, especially with AI. Learning how to learn is no longer optional. It's essential for survival. Ultralearning is not a cooking recipe. This book isn't giving you a perfect recipe of learning anything. In fact, Young admitted that it's hard to boil down ultralearning into a step-by-step formula. But instead, he offers you the principles of learning. Is it a bad thing? Not really. A formula would only work for a narrow set of problems, while a principle can apply to a much wider range of situations. Whether you want to learn cooking, a language, as Young did, or public speaking, the thing many people fear, this book can still be your rock-solid foundation. But since it doesn't give exact rules, it requires your effort to turn those principles into a plan, and then take action. Section 1. Meta-learning. Learn to draw a map. So, what's the first step in ultralearning? Just start doing it isn't the default answer. You need to draw a map to figure out your destination before you begin, so you don't get lost in the middle of the jungle. And the process is simple. Just answer the why, the what, and the how. The why. There are usually 2 types of motivation, instrumental and intrinsic. Instrumental projects are those that have an external purpose. For example, John wants to learn programming to make money. So, money is the purpose and programming is the tool. Another type is an intrinsic project. Jimmy wants to learn guitar simply because he loves music. That's quite intrinsic. In this case, the skill he wants to learn is the purpose itself. Just like the famous quote by George Mallory. When he was asked why he wanted to climb Mount Everest, he kindly replied, "Because it's there." The what? The what is like all the ingredients you list in your recipe, and you should spend a decent amount of time on this step. You'll want to break the skill into smaller sub-skills. You can do that by writing down the concepts, the facts, and the procedures. Concepts. Concepts are the things that need to be understood. This part is particularly useful when you're learning a highly academic subject. If you want to learn physics, it could be something like Newton's laws of motion or the law of conservation of energy. Facts. Facts are the things that need to be memorized. Skills like language learning are made up of 90% facts. You can't explain why an apple is called an apple. It is just a fact. Language learning, for instance, is made up of facts like vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar rules. Grammar rules can be grouped under concepts or facts, so it's not necessary to be black or white. Procedures are the things you would need to practice and usually don't involve a lot of thinking. Learning to ride a bicycle, for example, is almost all procedural. Ride on the bike, foot on the step, contract your leg muscles. Don't forget to stay balanced as long as possible. Or if it's learning a language, it could be something like listening to podcasts or lessons, or practicing speaking. The how. The third part of meta-learning is answering the how. Let's keep it short. What you need to answer is the exact steps you are going to perform to learn all the things in your what. For example, if you are learning how to cook, you can write something like, learn cooking by following Gordon Ramsay's cooking tutorials online, finishing 2 dishes every week. Of course, it should be much more complex than this. You'd better be super detailed about the plan. Think extra hard on this part, so you have fewer headaches when you execute it later. How much time for meta-learning? Another common question is how much time should I spend on meta-learning, the preparation? A good rule of thumb is approximately 10% of your total expected learning time. Let's say you're spending 1 hour a day to learn video editing, and you expect to learn it in 6 months. So the expected learning time will be 1 hour per day times 30 days for 6 months, which becomes 180 hours in total. 10% of this is 18 hours, which may sound a bit massive. However, the advantage of spending more time researching is that you can discover better learning materials or a better way to learn. But for procedure-heavy skills like cooking or any type of sport, it makes sense to trim it down to 3 to 5%. Also, meta-learning isn't a one-time event. You can always jump back to research after you start the project. Let's say your meta-learning time is planned to be 18 hours. You can definitely spend 10 hours before starting and distribute the remaining 8 hours throughout your projects. You can expect to do a better job on planning in the middle stage of the project, as you will have much better ideas about the skill after you start. Section 2. Focus. Sharpen your knife. Nobody actually solves procrastination, but maybe this guy. Failing to focus usually comes in 2 types. We fail to start, or we fail to sustain. Fail to start. If you're always keeping your tasks until the very last moment of the deadline so that you can literally put procrastination on your resume, you've come to the right place. According to Young, you can't start the task either because you want to do something else, like scrolling your phone, or you simply hate doing the task. Maybe it's exhausting or it's boring. It is rather straightforward to solve this problem. Force yourself to just start for 5 minutes. If your goal is to go to the gym, just get inside and do 1 set of exercise. Remember, you are allowed to leave after staying for 5 minutes. Why is it effective? Because the first couple of minutes are mentally the hardest. If you can get through them, you are very likely to keep going. Fail to sustain. So now you know how to trick yourself starting, but what about sustaining your focus? You can't focus for long because you get distracted. According to Young, you have to deal with 3 types of distractions. Distraction 1. The environment. If your phone is always buzzing, you might keep checking it. If your desk is messy, your mind might become messy as well. Before starting the task, remove anything that might grab your attention. Distraction 2. The task. The task itself can also be a problem. The task is too hard or too easy. It will be difficult to focus on. Only the right amount of difficulty can stimulate your brain and keep you engaged. Distraction 3. Your mind. The last type of distraction is, of course, your mind. Your emotions, especially negative ones, will always drag your focus away. Maybe you're in a toxic relationship, or you're burned out at work because of your boss. It's often best to address these issues first. But of course, Life sometimes sucks, so not all kinds of issues can be fixed when they happen. The solution is to simply be aware of your emotions and allow them to pass freely. Section 3. Directness. Go straight ahead. After meta-learning, which is the preparation phase, the first thing you have to do is to practice the skill by actually doing the thing you want to become good at. If you want to learn Spanish, the most direct way to learn it is to travel to Spain and try to do everything in Spanish with the assistance of Google Translate or AI. With this approach, you can figure out what types of words or phrases you need in real-life situations. Jung called it the principle of directness. If you still don't get it, let me show you something. I guess many of you guys have seen this video before. The kid learns to swim by being in a situation where he is forced to swim. You might hear some people on the internet complaining that he failed to speak the language after learning the language on Duolingo for 10 years. The issue is simple. It is too indirect, not even close. You will never learn to ride a bicycle by reading a book called How to Ride a Bike. Instead, you have to ride it directly, losing the balance and ride again until you never fall again. In the MIT challenge done by the author, the first thing he did was not watch the lecture videos. Instead, he attempted the exam paper even though he had zero knowledge about the subject. By doing this, he got a much better sense of what exactly he has to study by taking the exam on the very first day. What if you can't do it directly? But of course, not every skill can be done directly in the very beginning. You can't drive a plane or perform surgery on the first day. Difficult tasks like these will require you to master all the sub-skills before doing them in real life. But still, there could be intermediate steps that are relatively close to the final use case. A pilot, for example, will spend a lot of time practicing with the flight simulator. A surgeon will use animal organs to practice, mastering their skills before having surgery on patients. So even if you can't perform it straight away, you still need to find the intermediate practices that are close to the real situation. Train up the skills required and jump to a real one as soon as you are ready. Section 4. Drill. Attack your weakest point. After you practice the skill directly, you may find something is off. Maybe you are learning Japanese by speaking some random phrases in Google Translate to a real Japanese person. The bad news is that the person can't understand what you say at all, thanks to your crap pronunciation. So what can you do? Rate determining step. First of all, you need to diagnose which area will affect the most in the skill. Jung called this the rate determining step, a concept taken from chemistry. The rate determining step is nothing but the slowest step within a chemical reaction. Burning, for instance, is limited by either oxygen or fuel. For language learning, the rate determining step could be anything broad, like grammar, pronunciation, or something more micro, like how to describe directions, colors, or even numbers. By improving your rate determining step, you can have a tremendous improvement in the skill overall. But how do you actually know your current rate determining step? There are two ways. You can either ask for feedback from people who have the skill, or you can make a guess yourself. The key is not to lie to yourself, of course. Just like the famous quote from Richard Feynman, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. How to design your drill. The next tricky question is how to design a drill for the skill that you have identified. The answer is isolation. Isolation means purely focusing on that particular skill and ignoring other sub-skills. If you want to practice backhand in tennis, find a suitable practice that solves your current problem. Give 100% attention, even though it might make your forehand weaker temporarily. Or if you have a good coach, then you don't need to worry about it at all, because it's their job to find your weakness and design effective practices for you. The cycles of direct practice and drill. Ideally, you should alternate between direct practice and drills. In direct practice, you identify your weaknesses and you integrate your skills. Then you fix your weaknesses separately using effective drills. Simple logic, isn't it? Section 5. Feedback. Don't dodge the punches. Feedback is information you can use to understand how you're doing in the project. A grade on your exam paper, for example, is a simple form of feedback. And within the grade, you can know whether your study is screwed. For ultralearning, feedback is one of the most consistent strategies for learners to improve themselves and adjust their approach to attempt the project accordingly. Can feedback backfire? However, not all types of feedback are good. According to a study about the impact of giving feedback on learning, 38% of cases actually had a negative impact on the learning. Why is that? Because the feedback might lead to a confusing situation for the learner. Imagine if you asked your Spanish teacher how you can improve your maths, and she told you to remember more formulas, just like remembering words in a language. You might get a worse result by following her advice. Also, feedback like "you're smart" or "you're lazy" is the worst type of feedback that can be given by a teacher. The feedback that goes straight into somebody's ego is the worst type of feedback. Being told you are lazy might make you accept that you are indeed a lazy person. Being told you're smart offers absolutely no useful information about how you can improve, but also discourages hard work from yourself. Types of feedback. So, what type of feedback do you need to excel in your learning project? Barely telling you a grade, like an A or a C, isn't really useful. A better type of feedback would tell you which parts you're doing wrong. Lastly, the best type of feedback would also tell you how you can improve those parts you're doing wrong. How quickly should your feedback be? Another question you need to consider about getting feedback is how quickly it should be. Imagine a tennis coach is telling you that your technique has been wrong for the last 3 years, but he decides not to reveal it until today. That's the type of coach you have to avoid at all costs. In most cases, it is better to have quick or even instant feedback. If you hire a language teacher to help you improve your pronunciation, the teacher should correct your mistakes right after you finish the sentence. Instant feedback is incredible, as you can correct your mistake when you still have the memory of how you made the mistake. This also suggests why a short quiz right before the end of the class can be very effective, as it can allow both teachers and students to know how they are progressing in the class. You might think all types of feedback will include people in the system, but it is not always the case. Doing a practice problem yourself with a solution can provide you with feedback quickly. But of course, it is wise to ask for feedback from people who are better than you in the skill you're learning, simply because humans can't see their blind spot themselves. Section 6. Retention. Don't fill a leaky bucket. Being able to remember things is very important if your project is like learning a language or a project with a massive amount of information. But humans naturally can't remember things well. I bet you can't even remember what your lunch was on last Monday. But why? Because your brain thinks that it is not important. In fact, a normal human will forget 50% of information within an hour, 70 to 90% within a few days. The only way you can remember things is to tell your brain it is important again and again, and better in different ways. So what can you do? Space repetition. Let's focus on language learning first, particularly remembering words. One of the approaches suggested by Young is space repetition. Space repetition is nothing but revising the information at shorter intervals first, and then at longer intervals later. Let's say you're trying to learn a word. You can write down the meaning and an example sentence. Then you revise it after 1 day, 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. I know it is impossible to remember when to study it again. So mobile apps like Anki flashcards can help you to schedule a revision automatically. My secret technique of language learning. I'm not saying space repetition is bad, but it has its own problems. First, you are only remembering the definition and reading the same sample sentence again and again. There's no increase in difficulty, but in order to stimulate your brain, it has to be a little bit more challenging. Also, nobody loves to review flashcards. At least, I don't enjoy it. So, I'm now introducing a better approach that I first heard from a language learning expert, Steve Kaufman. Kaufman has been learning over 20 languages throughout his life and has reached a conversational level in around 10 languages. He suggested an approach called the natural order of language acquisition. Sounds fancy? Not at all. It is as natural as it sounds. In fact, it is how you learn when you were a baby. You first learn the basic sounds and very common words in real content, like the package of drinks or children's books. The more frequently you encounter a particular word, the earlier you will be able to understand the word and remember it without forcing yourself to do so. If the word is not appearing that often, that means it is not that important for now. But don't worry, you will eventually be able to acquire harder and less common words naturally with this approach. I personally applied this strategy extensively when I was learning Japanese, and I managed to pass the JLPTN2 exam using this strategy. What I did is very simple, as I enjoy watching anime. I will go to Netflix and watch an anime with subtitles. You need subtitles as you have no way to look up the words you don't know in a dictionary without subtitles. And since the normal play speed is too fast, I would also slow down the play speed to 0.75 or even 0.5. If I don't understand a word and I think it's important, I would look it up in the dictionary or ChatGPT. Then I write down the words and their meanings in a notebook. I know it sounds very normal, doesn't it? The special part is that I have never revised the words in the notebook at all, not once. When I encounter the same word again somewhere, and if I still forget its meaning, I will look for the word again. It is such a simple strategy that I've reached B2 level in Japanese, barely using any textbook, but relying on reading and watching authentic content extensively. Section 7. Intuition. Dig deep before building up. Richard Feynman, a legendary American theoretical physicist, could take problems others had worked on for months and immediately see the solution. Why? Because his intuition in physics and maths is much better than that of his peers. An intuition is a fast instinct that you know something without being able to explain why you know it. A world-class chess player can know the best move without barely thinking about it. If you have ever studied probability in your high school maths, you will know about that feeling of, how did you come up with that answer? Unlike algebra, you can almost always solve the problem step by step. But for probability problems, it is really hard to divide the problem into smaller parts, which means that if you know it, you can solve it. If you don't know it, can't solve it. The blink of insight is the only key to solving the problem, and sometimes it is really frustrating to deal with these kinds of problems. So, how can you train your intuition? Subjects like maths, physics, or programming rely heavily on your intuition. Jung offers you 4 rules to have a better intuition. Rule 1. Don't give up on hard problems easily. When you're working on a problem and you feel like giving up because you have absolutely no clues, set a timer for 10 minutes to push yourself further a little bit. And only allow yourself to look at the solution after the time is up. Rule 2. Prove things to understand them. We're introduced to a lot of formulas, like the famous quadratic equation in high school. We're often told to use the formulas to solve problems. But if you can prove the formula from scratch, then you will have a much deeper sense of why the formula works. As an engineering student, I know it is not easy at all. But if you have ever tried to prove things on your own, you will know the aha feeling I'm talking about. Rule 3. Always start with a concrete example. Humans don't understand things in the abstract very well. A kid can't learn the word fruit without seeing one in the real world. The same principle applies to learning maths formulas. You need a concrete and simple enough example to walk you through how to use it in the first place. Theory without an example won't make the thing easier, but will cause unnecessary confusion. Rule 4. The Feynman Technique. The Feynman technique is also one of the best ways to strengthen your intuition. His method is simple, which is to teach to learn. If you're trying to understand a concept, ask yourself how you would teach this to someone who has never heard of it before. If it is a problem instead, explain how to solve it step by step and why you think solving it in this way makes sense for you. Section 8. Experimentation. Explore outside your comfort zone. Let's finish the last piece of the puzzle in Ultralearning. After you start your learning project for a few months, you might get pretty familiar with what you're doing. You also know you have gone through the beginner stage. But there is another problem. You're progressing slower and slower. You might be just doing what you're already good at. You're trapped by your greatest enemy, the comfort zone. Before telling you how you can get out of your comfort zone, let me introduce you to Vincent van Gogh, the last person you would expect to become one of the most famous painters of all time. Many famous painters, like Leonardo da Vinci, showed their talents at an early age. Van Gogh, on the other hand, started painting when he turned 26. Not only did he start very late, but he was also not that good at drawing. His draft looks like a 10-year-old kid painting in the beginning. His drawing is so bad that one of his classmates says that his drawing had absolutely nothing remarkable about it. Eventually, he is unable to fit in with his classmates in the studio and shows no talent as a painter. He left the studio after staying for less than 3 months. At the age of 37, he died of a bullet wound to the stomach, which is suspected to be a suicide. Despite having only been drawing for 10 years, he had created over 2,000 pieces of artwork and became one of the most famous painters of all time. His works, such as The Starry Night, Irises, and Vase with 15 Sunflowers, are his iconic works. So, how did Van Gogh educate himself to be the best painter of all time without any traditional training? His 4-step pattern of self-education was actually very similar to the one used by successful scientists. Hypothesis, experiment, results, and repeat. For Van Gogh, he will first pick a learning resource, method, or style, and then he will produce a dozen, if not hundreds, of works in the direction he picked. After carrying out an insane amount of experimentation in that direction, he would become aware of his existing deficiencies, the areas that he needs to improve, and then pick another new resource, method, or style and start again. If you follow Van Gogh's approach, you will eventually be able to find the best techniques, the best styles that fit you the most. But it is not as easy as it sounds. You must have the courage to leave your comfort zone over and over again, so you make sure you are not the same as yesterday. And your weakness will never be your weakness again if you are willing to put tremendous effort into improving it. That's called the growth mindset. Section 9. Your first Ultralearning project. It doesn't matter if you want to learn a language, a new sport, or a really hard skill like programming or writing a book. The principles discussed by Jung will still be extremely helpful. Let's summarize what we've discussed. Research. Before you start your project, you need to do proper research, as discussed in meta-learning. The important things to research include what topic you're going to learn and what primary resources you're going to use. A benchmark for how others have learned the skill. What are the direct practice activities? And lastly, what are some effective drills and backup materials? Schedule your time. How much time are you willing to spend per day or per week? And how long you're going to commit to the project? Is it 6 months or 1 year? Although it is not necessary to have a deadline for every project, I still recommend having one. Unlike taking a course in school, where you have an exam to prove your skill level, many skills, including speaking a language, don't have a grade to treat as a goal. However, I still think setting a solid goal like be able to hold a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker within 1 year can be extremely helpful. This will show you the difference between your current skill level and your goal. The execution. After scheduling and planning, you will still need to execute the project. Ready to suffer the pain and enjoy the journey. A burst of effort can be useful at the beginning, but eventually consistency is the key to success. This is the end of today's episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit a like and subscribe. Also, you can find the links to the book in the description below if you're interested. And I will see you next time.